Tesla just made its 2026 leases look cheaper, but most drivers are about to pay more without realizing it. And the reason has nothing to do with the monthly payment. At first glance, Tesla's 2026 leasing update looks harmless, almost boring. A few numbers moved up, one went down, and that's where most people stop looking. The Model 3 standard now sits at $449 a month, with $3,000 due at signing. The Model Y Premium rear-wheel drive jumped to $549 with the same $3,000 up front. And the Model Y standard quietly dropped to $479, again with that exact same $3,000 required on day one. On the surface, it feels random. Why make one version cheaper while pushing the others higher, especially right before a big refresh like Juniper? But that's where Tesla's real strategy hides. The monthly payment is the part everyone stares at, but the down payment is the part that tells the truth. By keeping that $3,000 barrier fixed across every trim, Tesla is signaling something very specific. They are not trying to bring more people into leasing. They are deciding which cars they want circulating through their system. That single number, the one that didn't move, turns this from a discount story into a control story. Raising the Model 3 lease tells you demand is stable enough that Tesla doesn't need to sweeten the deal. That car has become predictable in Tesla's ecosystem. The premium Model Y getting more expensive says Tesla isn't interested in subsidizing higher-margin trims as Juniper approaches. Those cars would come back into the used market right when the refresh hits, and Tesla wants fewer of them doing that. Meanwhile, the only one that gets cheaper is the standard Model Y, the trim that moves the fastest and creates the least pricing chaos when it returns. So this wasn't Tesla cutting deals. It was Tesla quietly steering traffic, deciding which cars come back, when they come back, and how much risk Tesla keeps versus how much gets pushed onto drivers. And once you see that, the next question becomes impossible to ignore, because a lower monthly payment doesn't mean what people think it does anymore. The piece almost nobody looks at when they sign a Tesla lease is the number Tesla never shows on the screen, the residual value. That's the future price Tesla decides your car will be worth when you hand it back. And that number quietly controls everything. Your monthly payment isn't really based on what the car costs today. It's based on how much value Tesla expects that car to lose while you're driving it. When Tesla adjusts lease prices without touching the down payment, it's a signal that those future values are being rewritten. Tesla isn't saying it out loud, but the message is there. They're preparing for a world where today's Model Y isn't going to look as attractive once Juniper lands. And that means Tesla needs to protect itself from the drop in resale prices before it happens. Here's how it works. If Tesla believes a car will be worth less in 3 years, your lease has to cover a bigger chunk of that loss. That can show up as a higher monthly payment, or it can be hidden inside how the numbers are structured. Either way, the driver pays. The company doesn't. So when you see Tesla holding the upfront money steady while reshuffling the monthlies, what you're really watching is Tesla shifting depreciation risk away from its own balance sheet and onto yours. This is where leasing stops being simple. You're not just renting a car. You're entering a contract built on Tesla's guess about the future of the used EV market. And right now, that future is about to change fast. Because Juniper doesn't just bring new features. It resets what every older Model Y is worth. And that's where the math starts getting uncomfortable. Juniper isn't just another trim update. It's the kind of refresh that quietly redraws the entire used market overnight. When Tesla introduces a new generation, buyers don't just compare price anymore. They compare technology, efficiency, battery range, interior quality, and even software support. And the moment a newer version exists, every older Model Y becomes a second-choice product, no matter how good it still is. We've seen this before. After Tesla's 2023 Model Y refresh, used prices on the previous version slid much faster than anyone expected. Cars that were supposed to hold their value for 3 or 4 more years suddenly became harder to move. Buyers weren't asking, "Is this car still good?" They were asking, "Why would I buy this when the new one exists?" That shift alone knocked thousands off resale values in less than a year. Juniper is expected to bring better efficiency, new interior tech, and hardware upgrades that make today's Model Y feel older almost instantly. Even if the current cars run perfectly, their market position changes. They go from being the default Model Y to being the old Model Y. And that distinction matters more than most drivers realize. For someone leasing right now, this creates a silent problem. The lease was priced before the market fully feels that shift. Tesla builds in an estimate of future value, but the used market doesn't follow spreadsheets. It reacts emotionally and fast. When Juniper shows up, demand tilts, listings pile up, and prices bend downward harder than projected. And that's where drivers get caught in the middle. Because the lease doesn't care what the car is actually worth. It only cares what Tesla said it would be worth when you signed. And if those two numbers drift apart, the difference doesn't disappear. It lands on the person holding the contract. Which is why what looks like a safer, cheaper lease today can become the most expensive choice tomorrow. This is where the illusion of a cheaper lease really starts to crack. When most people see a number like $479 a month, their brain instantly relaxes. It feels manageable. It feels like Tesla finally made the Model Y easier to afford. But that reaction is exactly why Tesla keeps the $3,000 upfront payment locked in place. Because that's the part that tells you the car didn't actually get cheaper. It just got repackaged. If you spread that $3,000 across the life of the lease, the real monthly cost jumps fast. Suddenly that sub-500 payment starts behaving like something much closer to the higher trims, just without the features. You're still paying for the same vehicle loss. You're just paying for it in a quieter way. And then there's the depreciation itself. Leasing doesn't erase it. It just hides it behind a smoother-looking number. You're still covering how much value Tesla believes the car will lose while you drive it. With Juniper approaching, that loss is expected to be bigger, not smaller. So when Tesla lowers one monthly payment but leaves everything else untouched, what they're really doing is redistributing when and how you feel that hit. This is why cheaper leases often end up costing more. They make the risk feel smaller, even when the underlying math hasn't improved. The car is still set up to drop in value. The market is still about to shift, and you're still locked into a structure built before that shift fully plays out. So the question isn't whether the lease looks cheaper. It's who ends up absorbing the extra depreciation when reality doesn't match Tesla's projections. And depending on what kind of driver you are, that answer changes everything. This is where the illusion of a cheaper lease really starts to crack. When most people see a number like $479 a month, their brain instantly relaxes. It feels manageable. It feels like Tesla finally made the Model Y easier to afford. But that reaction is exactly why Tesla keeps the $3,000 upfront payment locked in place. Because that's the part that tells you the car didn't actually get cheaper. It just got repackaged. If you spread that $3,000 across the life of the lease, the real monthly cost jumps fast. Suddenly that sub-500 payment starts behaving like something much closer to the higher trims, just without the features. You're still paying for the same vehicle loss. You're just paying for it in a quieter way. And then there's the depreciation itself. Leasing doesn't erase it. It just hides it behind a smoother-looking number. You're still covering how much value Tesla believes the car will lose while you drive it. With Juniper approaching, that loss is expected to be bigger, not smaller. So when Tesla lowers one monthly payment but leaves everything else untouched, what they're really doing is redistributing when and how you feel that hit. This is why cheaper leases often end up costing more. They make the risk feel smaller, even when the underlying math hasn't improved. The car is still set up to drop in value. The market is still about to shift, and you're still locked into a structure built before that shift fully plays out. So the question isn't whether the lease looks cheaper. It's who ends up absorbing the extra depreciation when reality doesn't match Tesla's projections. And depending on what kind of driver you are, that answer changes everything. This is where Tesla's 2026 leasing changes stop being abstract and start hitting real people in very different ways. Because not all drivers are exposed to this shift the same way. The risk Tesla is moving around doesn't land evenly. It targets specific types of buyers, and most of them don't realize they're the ones being repositioned. Start with short-term lessees. These are the drivers who take a Tesla for 24 to 36 months because they want flexibility. They don't want to own. They don't want to deal with resale. They want a clean exit. On paper, leasing should be the safest way to drive an EV through a period of rapid change. But in a market about to be reshaped by Juniper, it becomes the most fragile option. Here's why. A lease is built on a depreciation curve that assumes the car loses value at a steady, predictable rate. For a Model Y, without a major refresh, Tesla might project that the car will retain around 55 to 60% of its value after 3 years. That number gets baked into your monthly payment. But once Juniper hits, the curve bends. The used market doesn't follow Tesla's forecast. It reacts to what buyers want now. And buyers almost always want the newer version. That's how you go from a planned 45% depreciation to something closer to 50 or even 52%. On a $50,000 vehicle, that difference can be $4,000 to $6,000 in lost value. That money doesn't vanish. It gets paid for through higher effective lease costs. So the very people leasing to avoid risk end up absorbing more of it than they expected. Now look at the second group, the Juniper waiters. These are the drivers who say, "I'll just wait for the refresh, then I'll lease or buy when everything is better." It sounds logical. Newer tech, better range, and maybe more stable pricing. But Tesla's history tells a different story. When a refresh arrives, Tesla rarely lowers the real cost of entry. They adjust the monthly numbers, but the upfront money stays stubbornly high. The depreciation clock just resets. So instead of avoiding the steep drop, Juniper waiters often step right into it. They lease or buy right as the car starts its sharpest loss in value. The vehicle is newer, yes, but the cost curve is still front-loaded. And because Tesla now expects faster tech turnover, the next update comes sooner, compressing the value window even more. Then there's the third group, used Tesla buyers. For years, this was the smartest financial play. Let someone else take the big depreciation hit, then buy the car at a discount. But with EVs, that buffer is shrinking. Batteries age. Software features change. Hardware becomes outdated. And when hundreds or thousands of lease returns hit the market right after a refresh, prices can swing wildly. In some regions, that flood can push Model Y prices $2,000 to $3,000 below what historical trends would suggest. But that dip doesn't last. Buyers who time it right can win. Buyers who miss it pay almost the same as before, but for a car with less warranty, less future software value, and more long-term risk. The used market becomes a game of timing, not just price. Across all three groups, the pattern is the same. Tesla's leasing changes didn't remove cost. They moved it. Short-term lessees take the hit through accelerated depreciation. Juniper waiters take it through front-loaded value loss. Used buyers take it through volatility and uncertainty. The people who pay the most aren't the ones chasing the newest Model Y. They're the ones assuming the old rules still apply in a market that has quietly changed. And that's why Tesla is so comfortable reshuffling these lease numbers now. Because once you understand who actually absorbs the risk, you start to see who the new pricing is really built for. Once you step back and look at all of this together, Tesla's real objective starts to come into focus. This isn't about making cars more affordable or squeezing a little more money out of a few trims. It's about controlling what happens before and after Juniper hits the market. Tesla is trying to shape the flow of vehicles through its entire ecosystem, from new deliveries to lease returns to used listings, so that nothing spirals out of control. One of Tesla's biggest threats right now isn't weak demand. It's too many cars hitting the wrong market at the wrong time. If thousands of high-spec Model Y leases all come back just as Juniper arrives, those vehicles suddenly compete with Tesla's own refreshed models. That pushes used prices down, which then pressures new car pricing, which then forces Tesla to offer more incentives. It becomes a chain reaction that hurts margins everywhere. By making premium trims more expensive to lease and standard trims just cheap enough to move, Tesla is quietly deciding which vehicles it wants to come back and which ones it wants to stay out longer. This is also why the upfront cost didn't move. That $3,000 acts like a gate. It limits how many people can enter the lease system at once, especially in a higher interest rate world where cash matters. Tesla isn't chasing volume through leasing. It's using leasing as a tool to manage supply. Fewer risky leases now means fewer unpredictable returns later. There's also a balance sheet reason behind all of this. Every leased car carries a future obligation for Tesla. When that car comes back, Tesla has to resell it. If the used market is weak, Tesla eats the loss. By adjusting lease structures before Juniper, Tesla is shifting more of that uncertainty onto drivers. The company locks in its numbers early, while the customer absorbs whatever the market delivers later. So what looks like a simple pricing update is really Tesla preparing for a market reset. New technology is coming. Used values are about to move. And Tesla wants to be the one deciding how that shock is absorbed. Not by the company, but by the people signing the contracts. Which leads to the one decision that actually matters now. Not what Tesla charges, but what kind of risk you're willing to carry. This is where the whole conversation finally becomes personal. Because once you understand how Tesla is shifting depreciation and timing, the question stops being, which Model Y is cheaper? And becomes, which kind of risk am I stepping into? Every path Tesla offers now comes with a different version of the same cost, just delivered in different ways. If you're thinking about leasing right now, you're buying convenience and predictability on the surface, but you're also locking into Tesla's assumptions about how the market will behave after Juniper. If the used market drops faster than Tesla predicted, you won't get the benefit of cheaper prices. You'll still be paying based on yesterday's optimism. Leasing feels safe, but in a fast-changing EV world, it can quietly become the most rigid option of all. If you're waiting for Juniper, you're betting that the reset will bring better value. And in some ways it will. New tech, better efficiency, and a cleaner starting point. But you're also stepping into the steepest part of the depreciation curve the moment you take delivery. The car will be at its most valuable the day you drive it home, and the drop from there will be sharper than most people expect. Waiting doesn't remove depreciation. It just delays when it hits you. And if you're looking at used Teslas, timing becomes everything. The flood of off-lease vehicles after Juniper could create rare windows where prices dip far below normal. Catch that moment, and you win. Miss it, and you could end up paying almost the same for a car with less warranty, older hardware, and more long-term uncertainty. The used market isn't broken. It's just far less forgiving than it used to be. Tesla's new leasing math pushes everyone toward thinking in monthly payments, because that's where the numbers feel smallest. But the real cost lives in how long you hold the car, when you enter the market, and what happens to its value after the next big update. Once you start thinking in those terms, the prices stop looking random. They start looking like a map of where Tesla wants the risk to go. At the end of the day, Tesla didn't make cars cheaper. It didn't give anyone a discount or try to make leasing more affordable. What it did was move the risk, shuffle depreciation, and quietly control who pays for what and when. The numbers you see on the screen, the monthly payment, the down payment, don't tell the full story. The story lives in the timing, the residuals, and the market forces Tesla knows are coming. Short-term lessees, Juniper waiters, and used buyers all face the same game, but each experiences it differently. The lease that feels easiest could cost the most. Waiting for the perfect refresh could expose you to sharper depreciation. And buying used without timing it carefully could leave you paying nearly the same while losing out on warranty and technology updates. The real lesson is that Tesla's 2026 leasing changes aren't random, and they aren't about generosity. They're about control, strategy, and psychology. The cars themselves didn't change overnight. What changed is how the cost hits you, the driver. The people who make the smartest decisions aren't the ones chasing low monthly payments. They're the ones who see the full curve, understand the depreciation risk, and plan around it. So before you sign a lease, wait for Juniper, or snap up a used Model Y, ask yourself, am I just reacting to the numbers on the screen, or am I seeing the full map Tesla has drawn? Because once you understand it, the choice becomes less about price and more about who carries the risk and when. And that's the kind of insight that separates a temporary savings from a costly mistake. The question now isn't what Tesla charges. It's how you use that knowledge to stay ahead.